Okay, so let's talk now about convincing materials. Lumion 7 has dialed up the authenticity of materials with our preloaded aged materials and also our ability to add weathering to any material that we work with. So I want to show you some of these preloaded aged materials and then also dive a little bit deeper into that new material editor and show you where some of these other weathering settings are to tinker with. So let's do just that. Let's take a look at this coffee bean that sits on top of our Boulevard Coffee Shop. All right, so we'll just kind of zoom in on that guy. I'll click on that material, and then we're going to go over to our Nature collection on the Nature tab there, and then there's a new collection called Aged. All right, so for the aged materials, we can choose from like aged bronze, aluminum, iron, leather, silver. There's all kinds of different selections here, some woods and some stones. So let's just go with aged bronze. When I click on that, kind of brings up an older looking aged material. Now, if I double click on my aged bronze, you can see that we can modify the properties of this preloaded aged material. So we can dial up the amount of weathering, and you can see that like weathering, it's not just like this simple overlay. It's actually almost like these little 3D particles of grime that build up on it. And then you can see the next layer kind of peel away too. So there's our pretty much new bronze, and then as it ages or weathers, you can see this, this buildup. So I think that's really cool. It gives a lot of increased authenticity to these materials. It really, to me, it takes away like that repeating tileable pattern. It almost lays like another repeating aged tileable pattern on top, and then you keep going, and it adds these like pieces of like dirt and grime that build up in the corners. It responds to your geometry. It's really slick. So let's see. We'll dial up our colorization just a touch, darken that up a little bit, maybe move more towards like a brown, and then the weathering effect. You can kind of back that off, increase it. We can choose from different like kind of pre-built weathering effects. So maybe like this one, that looks pretty cool. For the coffee bean. I'm pretty satisfied with that material. And let's see, let's move inside now to a model that I actually downloaded off of the 3D Warehouse. Now, this is a super simple coffee grinder. I just Googled it on a 3D Warehouse, found it on the 3D Warehouse. Extremely simple. I just needed to look right. So in order to dial this thing up, watch how easy it is to just click on these simple colors that were added in SketchUp, and I go to my aged materials, and I can choose like, maybe that's like an aged, we'll go with like an aged, I chose iron, but we're going to use aged bronze too, and then I'll click on this bottom one, go to Nature, Aged, and let's go with aged iron. So that bottom part's just a little bit rustier and gnarlier, and then let's double click on it, and let's dial up our colorization, dial down the darkness of it, and maybe back off that weathering effect just a touch, like that. So it just looks like this really super old aged coffee grinder. I don't know. So anyway, you can tinker around with those. We can dial back the weathering effect, really get something that's pretty authentic, to dial up that simple SketchUp material. It doesn't have to be like a pre-textured material in SketchUp. It can just be a simple color. As long as it has a different material applied to it, you can always swap it out in Lumion. So another example of that, like if I go up here, these lights are kind of a good example for aging because they have a lot of these kind of corners and indentations and these ridges running along. So let's click on that, and we'll go to Nature, Aged, and then I'm going to go to, let's see, we'll go with aged iron. Let's go with that really rusty look. And I'll show you how it kind of builds up in these edges here. So I'll double click on that. I always do kind of dial up the colorization and then make it darker. And then watch what happens when I dial up that weathering effect. See how it's like, it starts to weather even more, like on those, in those corners and crevices. It's really slick the way it does that. So if I dial up that colorization, that's about as good as we get there. We can tinker with a few different presets. I think this one might be better for what we're trying to accomplish on here. Something like that. That looks cool. I like that. All right, so that's our steel light fixtures now have a bit more depth to them. Let's see. Let's zoom out and let's take a look at this brick material that we've already worked on. So here we've got our ivy crawling up the wall. I'll click on that brick texture, and let's dial up this brick texture and add some aging effect to that. So here we have our weathering effect. We click on this brick, and you can see that right now it's set to that stone. If I dial up our weathering on there, you can see that we get one more layer of age and difference on there. I mean, it makes it such a huge difference. And a really good tip in general for Lumion is don't be afraid to slide the sliders around and see what happens. I find that it's best to just go, yeah, what does it look like when I go all the way to the right? Well, I don't want my building to necessarily be old and abandoned, but I do want to have just knock the edge off of that computer generated brick. And so I think that's going to do it right there. That's perfect. Okay, and then if I move to the inside, check this out. So we'll kind of zoom in here. Yeah, some other aged materials, you can see I kind of tinkered with this fixture a bit already. I've really had a lot of fun using these. I mean, I can't believe how many times they come into play. Check out this brick wall in here. So this is a material that I made in SketchUp. Basically made that whole wall one big texture, made it a unique texture in SketchUp. I sent it to Photoshop, tinkered with it a bit, added this graffiti to it, put a brick overlay on top of it. But now I don't want it to look so, I want it to have some depth to it. So in Lumion, we're going to add a standard material to it. And let's see, we'll go to, we don't want any gloss, we don't want any reflectivity. I do want a bump map though. And let's see, on that one, our relief, let's see if we can really get a good idea of that on the interior of the building. I think that's where we want our relief. Without any light shining, it makes it a little more difficult to really know, but I think that's the right normal map direction. We're going to go to our weathering effect. All right, and take a look at this. So our relief could drop down, and you can see how the weathering is responding to the relief as well. Okay, so then what we're going to do is tinker with some different weathering effects. And I mean, if you just don't be afraid to click around and see what different things do. So one weathering effect that I know ends up looking pretty decent is this blue one. I'm actually not sure what that blue is representing, but I know that it just gives more of a, almost like a staining to the wall. When I slide that around, it just adds another level of realism, of just yeah, maybe that wall was, it sat in here and it had some water run down it or something. It just looks very authentic. So that one looks pretty good. And then let's go zoom in outside on these 2x4 benches here. So here we can zoom way in on this guy. And you can see that this looks like a brand new 2x4 bench. These are kind of popular in Denver, especially in this more industrial, gritty Rhino district. And so yeah, it's going to look like that the day you cut it, but then give it 3 or 4 days in the Denver sun and a few snowstorms, it's not going to look like that. And I really don't even know that I like that look. I like it when it's a little bit more weathered and aged. So let's just click on that material, and I'm going to click on a standard material, and now we'll bounce over into our different settings here. You can see we don't want any gloss, we don't want any reflectivity. We could add a normal map and add some relief to it, that's fine. But check out the weathering. This is the wood weathering, and as I slide this up, watch what starts happening. You can really see it happening in the distance here, but you can see how the edges start to get scuffed. I mean, it's just like that. And then the grime comes, so maybe we want just a little bit of grime, not a lot though. We don't want our coffee shop to be dirty per se, but we just want it to look like it's real and it's an authentic material, not so brand new and pristine. So that's pretty cool. I mean, I'm way zoomed in, and when I get a little bit away from these materials, it really starts to render properly. Let's just dial back on that grime just a touch, like that. That looks pretty good. So you just get a little bit of different shading happening. It responds to your geometry. That stuff collects in the corners. I think it's genius. I love the way that works. So those are a few of the different textures that we can apply. So take a moment, tinker around in there. Click on, don't be afraid to click on things. Move the sliders. You can always get back to default by going back to a imported material and then go back to standard. It's no problem. So anyway, in the next tutorial, I'm going to show you some of these expanded rendering options. So we're going to send it to YouTube and send it to my Lumion for the stills. So stick with me, and I'll catch you in that next tutorial.